April 18, 1943, over the skies of Bremen, Germany. The sound was wrong. Too sharp, too fast, like tearing silk at the edge of the world. American bomber crews looked up from the waist guns of their B-17s, just in time to see something silver flash through the clouds and vanish again. It wasn't a Messerschmitt 109. It wasn't a Focke-Wulf 190. It was something entirely new, sleek, without a propeller, slicing the air in total silence before its cannons opened fire. A few seconds later, a B-17 in the high squadron exploded into flame. The gunner who saw it swore the attacking plane moved like lightning, gone before he could even swing his turret. That was the day the U.S. Army Air Forces realized Germany had leapt ahead, into the jet age. Back at Allied Command in London, intelligence officers crowded around photographs and reports. Messerschmitt Me-262, one caption read, twin-jet engines, nearly 550 miles per hour, no propeller drag. The German Air Ministry called it Schwalbe, the swallow. But for every American pilot over Europe, it meant something else, death at a speed they couldn't match. In Washington, D.C., a telegram arrived at the War Department. Immediate need for jet-propelled interceptor. Current enemy development poses extreme air superiority risk. The message landed on the desk of General Henry Hap Arnold, the commanding general of the U.S. Army Air Forces. He stared at it for a long moment before calling his adjutant. "Get me Kelly Johnson at Lockheed," he said. "Now." A few days later, on the sun-bleached tarmac of Burbank, California, Clarence Kelly Johnson, Lockheed's chief engineer, squinted into the light as a staff car pulled up. General Arnold stepped out, his cap tucked under one arm, his expression grave. "Kelly," Arnold said, "we've got intelligence that the Germans are already flying operational jets. We can't wait 2 years for prototypes. I need a jet fighter now." Johnson blinked. "How fast do you need it?" Arnold's reply was almost a whisper. 90 days, the words hung in the air. 90 days to design, build, and test America's first jet fighter. It sounded impossible. Even for Lockheed's legendary team of engineers, it bordered on madness. But Johnson didn't flinch. He turned to his deputy, Hal Hibbard, and said quietly, "Then we'd better get started." That night, the factory lights in Burbank burned long past midnight. Engineers scribbled equations on drafting paper, arguing over inlet designs and compressor ratios. They didn't have blueprints. They barely had jet engines. The only viable option came from England, the British de Havilland Goblin turbojet. One was already en route by cargo ship under heavy guard. Until it arrived, the Lockheed team would have to design everything else blind. They needed a workspace separate from the main Lockheed plant, where bureaucracy would only slow them down. Johnson found a solution, a rented circus tent next to a foul-smelling plastics factory. It was hot, cramped, and reeked of formaldehyde, but it was theirs. Inside that tent, the men set up wooden tables, lathes, and drafting boards. There were no official records, no memos, no committees. Just engineers' sweat and caffeine. They called themselves the Skunk Works. By the second week, the project had a name, XP-80, the Experimental Pursuit Model Number 80. The aircraft's shape began to form, a sleek fuselage with thin, swept wings and a single jet intake beneath the nose. Every curve was drawn by hand. When Lockheed's procurement officer visited, he asked Johnson for an official project timeline. Kelly scrawled it on the back of an envelope. Day 1, design begins. Day 37, fuselage complete. Day 60, wings mounted. Day 90, first flight. The officer thought it was a joke. Johnson wasn't smiling. "Tell General Arnold," he said. "We'll meet his deadline." The team worked 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. There were no air conditioners, no proper restrooms, just determination and cigarette smoke. One engineer, Don Palmer, remembered it as organized chaos, but the best chaos of my life. As the days turned into weeks, they scavenged parts wherever they could. Landing gear from a P-38, instruments from a B-25, seat frames from a wrecked trainer. Every bolt mattered. Every ounce counted. The Goblin engine finally arrived from England, covered in grease and packing straw. It was the first time most of the team had ever seen a turbojet up close. They took it apart piece by piece, studying it like an alien artifact. Then they built the fuselage around it. By June 1943, the XP-80 was no longer a dream. It was a metallic green-gray arrow resting quietly under the California sun. When General Arnold returned to inspect progress, he stopped in his tracks. "You actually did it," he said, running a hand along the aircraft's smooth nose. Johnson smiled. "We're not done yet, sir, but she's ready to fly." Test pilot Milo Burcham climbed into the cockpit that afternoon. The runway shimmered in the heat as mechanics cleared the area. The Goblin engine whined to life with a high-pitched roar that echoed across the valley, a sound no one in America had ever heard before. As the plane began to roll, the nose lifted slightly, wheels still on the ground. Burcham throttled up. The XP-80 shot forward, accelerating faster than any piston engine could dream. Then, at 110 miles per hour, it lifted off, smooth and effortless. At that moment, on that field in Burbank, the United States of America entered the jet age, and they'd done it in just 143 days. But this was only the beginning. The Goblin engine was too weak, the airframe too raw. Europe was still burning, and the Me-262s were already killing bombers over Germany. The XP-80 had proven America could build a jet, but now they had to make it a weapon of war. July 1944. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. The prototype, now christened the P-80 Shooting Star, sat gleaming under the morning sun. Engineers swarmed around it, clipboards in hand, their coveralls streaked with oil and graphite dust. Across the field, military observers stood behind a rope line, their eyes fixed on the machine that could change the air war forever. Milo Burcham strapped in again. The new aircraft had been fitted with an improved General Electric I-40 engine, a beast capable of pushing it well beyond 500 miles per hour. As the canopy sealed shut, a low whine filled the air, different from any piston engine's rumble, smooth and metallic like a turbine ready to tear apart the sky. Tower, Lockheed prototype ready for takeoff. Roger, proceed when ready. The jet screamed down the runway. In seconds it was airborne, slicing through a clear Ohio morning. Ground crews shaded their eyes as the P-80 arced into a steep climb, leaving behind only a silver shimmer of heat. When Burcham banked hard and dove, the observers gasped. The aircraft moved with the grace of a falcon and the fury of a thunderbolt. When he landed, his grin said everything. "She flies like she's alive," Burcham said. "You can feel the speed." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the Me-262 had begun operations in deadly earnest. German pilots from Jagdgeschwader 7 were ambushing Allied bomber formations, cutting through escorts and vanishing before anyone could react. "They came out of nowhere," one B-17 gunner recalled. "You couldn't even track them. One second the sky was clear, the next they were gone and another fortress was burning." General Arnold's reports painted a grim picture. Each day, more Allied airmen were lost to the jets. The P-80 wasn't just an experiment anymore. It was a lifeline. But every advancement came with new problems. The I-40 engine ran hot, almost dangerously so. On one test flight, the turbine overheated and seized midair, forcing Burcham to glide the aircraft down on sheer instinct. Another day, a fuel line burst, setting the tail section ablaze before mechanics could even reach it. The team was learning, painfully, what the Germans already knew. Jets were powerful but fragile. To push development forward, Kelly Johnson made a decision that raised eyebrows across Lockheed. He sent Lieutenant Richard Bong, America's top fighter ace with 40 kills, to test the P-80. The War Department wanted his opinion before production began. Bong, used to the twin-boom P-38 Lightning, was skeptical. "It's a pretty toy," he said, tapping the jet's smooth nose, "but can it dogfight?" Johnson's reply was calm. "Try it." Bong took off from Muroc Dry Lake, the same place where Chuck Yeager would one day break the sound barrier. The jet lifted effortlessly, its wings whispering through the desert air. He climbed, rolled, and dived, feeling the aircraft's response tighten like a coiled spring. It wasn't a toy. It was the future, but tragedy soon struck. On August 6, 1945, just hours after the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima, Bong's P-80 malfunctioned on takeoff. He never made it out. America's top ace was gone, the price of progress paid in the dawn of a new era. The P-80's production moved forward regardless. The Lockheed plant expanded overnight, drawing thousands of workers, men and women alike. They worked 3 shifts a day under armed guard, piecing together aluminum ribs and jet turbines. Propellers were out. Turbines were in. The world was changing. By late 1944, the first operational units were ready. They bore the name Shooting Star on their tails, polished silver streaks designed to meet Germany's jets head-on. Yet fate intervened. The war in Europe was ending faster than expected. Hitler's Reich was collapsing, and the Me-262s were running out of fuel, parts, and pilots. When the first P-80s arrived in Italy in early 1945, they were too late to see serious combat. The Luftwaffe was finished. The jet that was built to chase the Swallow would never meet it in the sky. Still, those few test flights over the Mediterranean made something clear. America was ready for what came next. After Germany's surrender, Allied intelligence officers recovered dozens of Me-262s from abandoned airfields. Kelly Johnson himself inspected one up close, running his fingers along its twin nacelles. "We're not behind anymore," he told his engineers back in California. "We're ahead now, and we're not stopping." The P-80's sleek lines would inspire the next generation of American jets, the F-86 Sabre, the F-104 Starfighter, and cement the reputation of the Skunk Works as the most daring engineering group on Earth. In less than 5 months, in a tent that smelled of chemicals and glue, a handful of men had changed aviation forever. From that moment on, wars would be fought at jet speed. October 1945. Burbank, California. The Lockheed factory buzzed with a strange, quiet energy. The war was over, but the men and women who had spent the past 2 years building something impossible were restless. They had created the world's first operational American jet fighter, yet few outside the military even knew its name. Inside, a small office at the edge of the airfield, Kelly Johnson stood over a drafting table covered with new blueprints. The word P-80 had been crossed out in pencil. Below it he'd written a new designation, F-80 Shooting Star, the F for fighter. The war had ended, but the race had only just begun. The world was changing faster than anyone could have imagined. Across the Pacific, Japan lay in ruins, its cities reduced to ash by firebombs and the atomic bomb. The skies that once roared with B-29s and Zeros were now eerily empty. And yet, in those skies, the next battle was already being imagined. In Washington, the newly formed U.S. Air Force, no longer a branch of the Army, had its eyes on the future. Reports filtered in from captured German scientists and engineers, advances in swept-wing design, axial flow turbojets, even early concepts of supersonic flight. The Me-262 was just the beginning. America couldn't afford to fall behind again. The F-80 would become the bridge between two worlds, the piston-driven dogfights of W2 and the supersonic jet duels that would define the Cold War. In late 1945, the Air Force selected a young pilot named Colonel Albert Boyd to lead an evaluation squadron for the P-80s at Muroc Army Airfield. Boyd, known for his calm precision, was called the father of modern flight testing. His mission to push the Shooting Star to its absolute limits. At dawn, the desert air still cool and golden, Boyd climbed into the cockpit of F-80A serial number 4485044. As the engine spooled up, the turbine's metallic hum echoed across the sand. Steady, powerful, unlike anything from the war years. Throttle forward. Acceleration instant. Takeoff effortless. The F-80 cut across the dry lakebed like a silver blade. Boyd pushed it higher, faster, until the altimeter blurred and the horizon turned white with speed. "This," he later said in his report, "is no longer flight as we've known it. This is something new." He wasn't exaggerating. By 1946, Lockheed's Skunk Works had become legendary. Every major manufacturer, North American Republic Douglas, was scrambling to build their own jet. But none had done it the way Kelly Johnson's team had, with no paperwork, no committees, no wasted motion. When reporters asked Johnson how he'd managed it, he replied simply, "We trusted our people. We didn't ask permission. We just built the damn airplane." It became the Skunk Works philosophy, quick, quiet quality. That philosophy would guide them through projects that would shape the next half-century, the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, and even the stealth aircraft that would one day fly unseen across hostile skies. All of it began under that circus tent in Burbank, where America's first jet was born out of desperation, intuition, and defiance. As for the F-80 itself, it didn't retire quietly. In 1950, when war erupted in Korea, the Shooting Star was called upon again. It was no longer the newest aircraft in the sky, but it was fast, reliable, and proven. In those first chaotic months of the Korean War, F-80s from the 8th Fighter Bomber Wing launched from bases in Japan and flew hundreds of sorties against North Korean columns. The jet that had once been a desperate experiment was now America's frontline fighter, and on November 8, 1950, history came full circle. Near the Yalu River, Lieutenant Russell Brown, piloting an F-80C, spotted a glint of metal above him, an aircraft he didn't recognize. It was sleek, swept-wing, and unbelievably fast. Brown dove, pulled behind it, and fired. The enemy jet exploded in a trail of smoke. Back at base, confirmation came through. Brown had just scored the first jet-on-jet kill in history, downing a Soviet-built MiG-15, the Shooting Star. The aircraft, built in 90 days to chase the Mi-262, had finally found its rival. That moment marked the dawn of a new era, one that Kelly Johnson himself had helped unleash. He once wrote in his private notebook, "War accelerates the impossible. It demands invention at gunpoint. But if we can build under that pressure, if we can think faster than fear, then maybe peace will be built the same way." February 1954. At Edwards Air Force Base, the last operational F-80 taxied out for its final flight. Its paint was faded, its skin dotted with rivet patches and scorch marks. But when the engine came alive, the old sound returned, the turbine's rising hum, the heartbeat of a new age. As it lifted off one final time, the ground crew stood in silence, watching it vanish into the endless blue. From that first sketch under a tent to the roar over Korea, the P-80 had done more than chase Germany's jets. It had proven that America could leap without hesitation into the unknown and land there flying.